All right, so ladies, good morning, almost good afternoon. I thought with a couple of minutes heads up for this shir, we could talk about some of the shilas that have come up in the last little bit in camp. And the truth is that you could pick from almost any area of Shulchan Aruch, shilas that have come up at camp. Baruch Hashem camp, there's over 1,000 people here. So thank God most of everything runs Kedas V'Chedin, but every now and then there are shilas that come up la Halacha that we need to address, we need to discuss. So I'll give you guys a choice. I mean, we could do more than one topic, but we'll give you guys choices. Let's see if this is syncing here. Hashem, this will work. I think we'll get there. Questions in Shabbos, in Kashrus, in Taras Mishpacha, in Choshen Mishpat. Any of those.
They all sound so like Shabbos. I like Shabbos here. That's
Shabbos questions. So interesting Shabbos question. We'll start off with the Shabbos question.
And then could you do what you think is the most interesting?
Yeah, totally. Shabbos questions. I got an interesting question at the beginning of camp, and also this past week it came up slightly differently, which is with regards to carrying walkie-talkies on Shabbos for staff members. So the first thing that's kedai to point out, and this is important, the Shulchan Aruch writes that the obligation of a rabbi of a community is to make sure that people in the community know that pikuach nefesh is derech Shabbos, meaning that in any case of life-threatening situations, that one violates Shabbos without asking any questions about it. And Shulchan Aruch is very charif, that if somebody delays in pikuach nefesh because they are worried about Hilchos Shabbos, the responsibility and the fault of that is on the rabbi of the community for not appropriately educating the community that Chilul Shabbos is derech Shabbos, that Pikuach Nefesh is derech Shabbos, that Chilul Shabbos doesn't exist in that case, more or less. We'll discuss it more or less in a moment, but that no questions asked. You do whatever is necessary in order to save a life on Shabbos. So if somebody is bleeding out on a Shabbos, gets injured, so you don't ask questions. You put them in a car, you drive them to the nearest hospital, and you take care of them. You call 911, you whatever it is. Now, the la Halacha, pikuach nefesh is derech Shabbos. What about safek pikuach nefesh?
Usually, like days or like you can try to get a non-new involved.
So safek pikuach nefesh. What's a safek? What is a safek pikuach nefesh?
Not sure.
You're not sure. So there are two areas that you might be not sure. It could be that you're not sure because you are not sure whether or not they are in a life-threatening situation, right? That's oftentimes the case. You don't know. Is it life-threatening? Is it not life-threatening? That's one kind of safek. And then there's another safek, which is safek pikuach nefesh, safek whether this is going to help, or safek whether it is not going to help. So in both of those fakos, we paskin that safek pikuach nefesh is the same as pikuach nefesh. So if you have somebody that gets injured on a Shabbos, and now you don't know what you should do, could do, or what their circumstances are. So you have both of those fakos. You don't know if they're pikuach nefesh, you don't know if they're not pikuach nefesh, you don't know if what you will do will help, but you don't know if what you will do will not help. You violate Shabbos, you do whatever is necessary, and you take care of them. What do we mean by whatever is necessary? So this is an important hagdara that Rabbi Neuberger taught me when I was in Smicha, that the best general rule to know in terms of pikuach nefesh is whatever you would do on a Tuesday. Meaning, you get this from time to time, that somebody's going to ask a question, they're going to say, I stubbed my toe. Rosh Hashanah likes to talk about this case. That in National Geographic, whatever it was a Reader's Digest, like 40 years ago, there was a story of a guy that stubbed his toe and died. Because the stubbed toe was an ingrown toenail that became infected, and then from that infection he developed and died. So does that mean that every time you stub your toe, you rush to the emergency room? No. Right? Meaning, you wouldn't normatively do that. Is it possible in some freak situation that stubbing your toe could lead to death? Yes. Does anybody normatively concern themselves that stubbing their toe is going to cause death? No. So, the way that I say it to Chabura in my community all the time is, if your kid called you with this from school, would you leave work to go and pick them up? Or would you say, we could wait until the end of the day? Right? Meaning, like, if you're in the middle of something, so Shabbos, everybody's at home and relaxed, so like, oh, we have to rush to the hospital. Maybe that's true. But like, if the kid was at school and you were at work, and the school called and said, such and such happened to your kid, would you cancel the meeting that you're in, get in the car, go pick up your kid from school? Depends, right? Right? Broken bone, probably yes. In the days of the Rishonim, a broken bone was not Mechal Shabbos. When a person broke their bone, you weren't Mechal Shabbos, so that for two reasons. One, because they assumed that broken bones were not life-threatening, and two, because they couldn't do anything for them. Right? Today we assume that broken bones could be life-threatening because we understand that there are infections that come as a result of broken bones, and we can do something about it. So, meaning the suffix is on both sides. We have that suffix. The medicine in the days of the Rishonim, it seems, was not to that extent. The Ramban deals with this question in a number of places, and Halacha l'maaseh today, if somebody breaks their bone on a Shabbos, it breaks his arm, so you take him to the hospital. Now, all of that is good and well and true in terms of Pikuach Nefesh in general, but there is an interesting question, which we'll say the way that most of the sugyas, most of the Rishonim deal with the question, which is a question of Pikuach Nefesh on Shabbos. Is that a question of Hutra or Dechuya? So there are two ways of looking at the question of Pikuach Nefesh on Shabbos. Either that it is mutar, or that it is dochui, meaning, what happens to Shabbos? What happens to Shabbos when there is Pikuach Nefesh? Does Shabbos disappear? Meaning, is it now that there is this kind of like this bubble within Shabbos where there's no malacha, there's no yisurim, there's no nothing, Pikuach Nefesh, no Shabbos? Or there is Shabbos, but it is overridden by the necessary requirements of Pikuach Nefesh. What's the nafkamina between these two ways of looking at Shabbos, whether Shabbos is Hutra or Dechuya? So if Shabbos is Hutra, if Shabbos is mutter, meaning it's mutter to violate something, then in as much as you possibly can, you violate Shabbos to the least ability possible. Meaning, all things being equal, you do as much as you can to limit the violation of Shabbos. All things being equal, which is a very important caveat, which we'll discuss in a moment. If Shabbos is Dechuya, if Shabbos is pushed aside, then there's no consideration whatsoever. Doesn't make a difference. Now, where does this become relevant and practical? Is if I can violate a deraisa to save somebody's life, or I can expend exactly the same amount of effort and have exactly the same result in violating a derabanan, should I violate the derabanan versus violate the deraisa? That's the nafkamina between Shabbos Hutra and Dechuya. And according to a number of the poskim, this might be a machlokes between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, machlokes between Ashkenaz and Sfardim, although there is something to be said that maybe the Shulchan Aruch is also machmir. General approach of most organizations in the United States of America, Hatzalah organizations, and other kinds of Pikuach Nefesh, Chabura on Shabbos, is to paskin like the regular understanding of the Ramah, that Shabbos is not Dechuya, that it didn't disappear. Shabbos is mutter, meaning you can violate as much as you need to, but what we paskin is hakal koydem. If you need to violate Shabbos, you violate the lesser of the violations, the Rabbanans first, then the Eraisas. If you can do it through a nachri, you call up a nachri rather than to do it yourself, all things being equal. And that's an important caveat, that's an important consideration. So this comes up from time to time with regards to a medical professional that is on call on Shabbos. So anybody here planning on going into any medical professions or have relatives in any medical professions? Yeah?
My aunt's very big in Hatzalah in Israel.
Ah, okay. So, what'd you say?
My uncle.
Okay, so aunts and uncles involved in Hatzalah, the halacha is that if somebody is called out on a Hatzalah call on Shabbos, they absolutely get in the car and they go. Right? That is the din. That is the halacha. That is what is appropriate to do. I have a yid in my community who is a emergency medicine doctor, actually doctor and a professor. Every now and then he has to take a call on a Shabbos. He was buying a new car. So he said to me, "What car should I get?" This is a shot. What car should I get? Now, I'm a rabbi. I don't necessarily have opinions about what brand of car you should buy. But there is an interesting question to ask. Should he buy an electric car? Why should you buy an electric car? Well, because a combustion engine is a malacha de'oraisa according to all poskim. Right? A regular gasoline-burning combustion engine is a malacha de'oraisa. Every time you put your foot on the gas, it is injecting gas into a piston that is going to explode, that has a spark plug, that meaning you are quite literally adding fuel to a fire that is exploding, multiple times per minute, per second. That's what generates movement in the car. Lots of malachas. Now, pikuach nefesh, absolutely, you violate as much Shabbos as is necessary to get to the hospital, to get the patient to the hospital, whatever the case is. But there is an interesting discussion with regards to electricity on Shabbos. Is electricity a malacha mid'oraisa, or is electricity a malacha mid'rabbanan? So this was an interesting discussion 60, 70, 80 years ago. Poskim were discussing what is electricity on Shabbos. So there are those that argue that electricity is, certainly with regards to incandescent bulbs, which none of these are. Maybe that one. Okay, an incandescent bulb has a filament that burns. That's a malacha de'oraisa according to everybody, right? If I run an electrical current through a piece of metal that heats it up to the point that it glows, that's called havar. I'm creating a fire on Shabbos that burns. That is for sure according to everybody a malacha mid'oraisa. Apparently, Reb Chaim Ozer, before the Second World War, was machmir to make havdalah on an incandescent bulb so that he could say bari ma'oreh ha'esh on the incandescent bulb to educate people that it was an actual fire, meaning that they shouldn't think that turning it on Shabbos is mutter, because it's a fire, it's a real fire. That, according to everybody, is malacha mid'oraisa. What about the majority of our technology today, which is circuits and LEDs and screens? So is that malachas mid'oraisa or malachas mid'rabbanan? So the Chazon Ish was of the opinion that it's a malacha mid'oraisa. Rav Asher Weiss is of the opinion as well that it is a malacha mid'oraisa. But the majority of the poskim today hold that is an issur mid'rabbanan. Electricity is an issur mid'rabbanan, in which case driving an electric car would be an issur d'rabbanan. So if I'm a doctor and I need to take calls on a Shabbos, and I'm planning on spending X amount of money on a new car, and I'm debating between a combustion engine car and an electric car, is it better to buy an electric car? Yes.
Yes. So
Right? That meaning, la halacha, I should buy an electric car, because that way I know that I'm going to need to violate Shabbos at some point. Hakal kodim. That's the principle. I would like to violate as little Shabbos as possible. Hakal kodim. That's because Shabbos is hutra. It's not techuya. Right? Shabbos is not pushed out of the window. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's that it's mutter. It's mutter. I can violate Shabbos as necessary. Yeah.
But doesn't it? Some rabbis think it could maybe cause something in people's minds now that I guess since it's Sarabanan, the electric car, even if it's not as an emergency as before, they would still be it's Sarabanan. I don't know. I feel like it would make more leniency in that.
Right. So there is a misnomer that people have in the world of halacha that derabanans are less important than deraisas. Now, to a certain extent, that is true, but that's only because Chazal told us that it's true. Right? There's an interesting discussion that the Shev Shmaitzer has at the beginning of Shev Shmaitzer, whether the halacha of, get this is a little bit mind-bending, we have a principle that Safek D'Oraisa L'Chumra, Safek D'Rabbanan L'Kula. Right? If I have a doubt in the case of D'Oraisas, I have to be machmer. So if I don't know, is the chicken kosher, is the chicken treif, I'm machmer. Right? Whereas in the D'Rabbanan, I have the right to be maker, I have the right to be lenient. that din of Safi Deraisa L'Chumra, is that a din Deraisa or a din Derabanan? Meaning, who told us that a Safi Deraisa is L'Chumra? So that's a machlokes. That's a machlokes in the Rishonim. In the Rambam and the Rashba, the Shemaitza talks about in Shemaitza Aleph. Right, whether Safi Deraisa L'Chumra is a din Deraisa or a din Derabanan. But either which way, the rules of the way that halacha work, more or less, Chazal could have told us that a Safi Derabanan is L'Chumra as well. Right? They could have told us the same thing. They could have told us that the Deraisas and the Rabbanans are exactly the same in terms of the stringencies. Chazal told us whatever the rubric is that they believed was correct to teach us. There is a misnomer that people have from time to time, which is that the Rabbanans are less important than the Deraisas. That we shouldn't take them as seriously. And that is aside from the fact that it's a mistake, it's also a grave insult to the institution of Din D'Rabbanan and a grave insult to those that we refer to as Chazal. And we'll just go off topic for a second because it's important just to make this point as clear as possible. First and foremost, when we ask the question of who are D'Rabbanan, so D'Rabbanan is Klal Yisrael, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu partners with the Jewish people in order to determine how Yiddishkeit should operate in any generation, in every generation. So it's important to take note of the fact that we, as the Jewish people, have the right to determine the rules, the rubrics, the contours of halacha is a huge deal. Like, that's Hashem giving us the right and the responsibility to determine the way that the Torah should operate in every generation. And that's something that we should be very proud of and very excited for. And meaning that's we the people, right? We the people have the right to determine the way that halacha operates. Now, obviously not everybody at all points in time. One has to be of the expertise and caliber to be able to do this. But it is us, the Jewish people, throughout the generations that have determined what dinim d'Rabbanan are. So yeah, people decide to be makel about dinim d'Rabbanan. That is an insult to the entirety of the Jewish people. But it's also worth understanding who d'Rabbanan is. I mean, when we say that something is a din d'Rabbanan in general, so I spoke about this a number of years ago in Boca on Tisha B'Av, because Tisha B'Av is also the yahrzeit of the Chazah of Lublin. So I told over the story that the Chazah of Lublin, Chazah of Lublin could see Sofer Olam Vad Sofer. That's why he was called the Chazah, right? Yaakov Yitzchak of Lublin, he was known to have eyesight that could penetrate, like from one end of the world to the other. He could look at your face and tell you what you had eaten for breakfast, 7 months ago on a Tuesday morning. Like, ad kedei kach. His Talmud, and in some areas his continuation and or competitor stories of Palisha Chassidus, not exactly for now, but is probably of his greatest Talmidim was the Yid HaKadosh of Pshischa, Yaakov Yitzchak of Pshischa. He was known as the Yid HaKadosh because he had the same name as his Rebbe. Both of them were Yaakov Yitzchak, so they didn't want to call him Yaakov Yitzchak in the presence of his Rebbe, so he was known as the Yid HaKadosh, the Holy Jew. It once happened that the Chazah of Lublin was going out of town, and he said to the Yid HaKadosh, you be the Rebbe when I'm out of town. The Chassidim can come to you and bring the Kvitlach. And he said, Rebbe, I don't have your eyesight. I don't have the capacity to see from one end of the world to the other. How can I help a Jew that comes to me to help them like you help them? Somebody's going to come to me, they're going to talk about, the daughter that needs a shidduch, and the cow that isn't producing enough milk, and the grain that is not enough to last the winter, and the cholera that's in their house. Like, I don't have the ability to see into the shorish haneshama, to the roots of their soul, like you can see into the roots of their soul. So what should I do? So the Chazah said to him, I'll give you my eyesight, no problem. So he says, come here. He says, puts his hand over his eyes. He says, okay, now you see like I see. So the Yid HaKadosh described that a Jew came into the room, he sat down, and he started saying, this is what's going on in my life, this is the problem, this is it. And the Yid HaKadosh is like davening, like, what do I do here? And then he was a gadol b'Torah all by himself in a tremendous ilui in Nigla and in Nistar. He's davening in Jerusalem, how do I help this Jew? He says, and then the whole room went dark. The whole room went dark, and he saw the face of the person in front of him morphing into another face. And then the room went dark again, and it changed to another face, and then another face, and then another face, and then another face. Until he was staring into the face of Adam Harishon, and he saw the root of this Jew's soul all the way from Adam Harishon to right now, and everything that had happened to him in every previous iteration that he had been in this world, all the Gilgulim that had happened beforehand, and why this specific thing is happening to him now, and how to fix what he needs to fix in this world through whatever challenge he's going through. That was the eyesight that the Chayzer of Lublin gave to the Yid HaKadosh. Story number one. Story number two. It once happened that in Lublin, when the Chayzer of Lublin was the Rebbe of Lublin, the Berdichev, Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, was coming to visit. And the whole town came out to the streets. The whole town came out to the street to meet with the Berdichev, to greet the Berdichev. The only person that wasn't there was the Chayzer of Lublin. And they came to find him, and he was hiding under his bed. And they said to him, Rebbe, what's going on? He says, I'm so scared to meet with the Berdichev, because if he sees me, he'll know everything that I've done wrong. Meaning, the Chayzer of Lublin, that had eyesight to see from one world to the other. Mamish, from all of the doors, from one side of the world to the other, and to see right to the Shorish and Neshama of every Jew, was terrified to stand in the presence of a Rebbe one generation before him, the Berdichev, because he'll see. And the Berdichev was the greatest lover of Jews in the world, right? The Berdichev was like the sweetest Jew ever. The Chayzer was terrified that he should see him. And you imagine that the Chayzer to the Magid, and the Magid to the Baal Shem HaKadosh. And then you imagine, and this is true by Hasidim, this is true, by the way, this is true in the Litvish Welt as well. Reb Chaim Volozhiner refused when they said to him that he was the continuation of the Gra. He said, you cannot say me and the Vilna Gaon in the same sentence. You cannot say me and the Vilna Gaon in the same sentence. Can't say it. And you imagine that if this is, and this is just a few generations ago, that this is how the Chachamim that we look up to saw their Rebbeim, and their Rebbeim saw their Rebbeim. And you imagine for a moment what the Baal Shem HaKadosh and what the Vilna Gaon would have said in the presence of the Rambam, and what the Rambam would have said in the presence of the Amoraim, what the Amoraim would have said in the presence of the Tanaim. So much so that the Klausenberger Rebbe says that when we read the Gemara, we read Abaya and Rava. He says it's true that they were people, but they were not people. He says, Eish Yardim min Hashamayim v'kar lo Abaya. It's a fire that came down from heaven that we now call Abaya. And a fire that came down from heaven that we call Rava. And Abaya and Rava are fifth generation Amoraim. And they were, in their minds, nothing compared to Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish, and Rabbi Shmuel. And Rabbi Shmuel, who were nothing in their own minds compared to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, he said, all of my greatness came from the fact that when I was a kid, I saw Rabbi Meir once from behind. And Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and those are the people that we call Dirabanan. That's Dirabanan. So it's true that sometimes people like to say Dirabanans are not so important. But then when you take a moment and realize who are Rabbanan, it doesn't say it in the Torah, it's just the rabbis. Who are the... Yeah, that's everybody. That's the whole thing, the whole picture. Like Kihem Chayin V'Arich, that's the whole story of what we call Dirabanan. When we say that this is an Isur Dirabanan, it means that Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi Aglid and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, that they decided that this is what's good for the Jewish people. These Chevra that lived in that world towards the end of Bayesheni and in the Churban thereafter, that they decided that this is what the Jewish people need for the next 2,000 years and beyond, until Eliyahu Navi will come and introduce us to a new Sanhedrin, to the world of Mashiach Tzidkenu, and this is what we're going to need. I trust them. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's... So it's true that there is a Yetzer Hara for people to say that this is just the Rabbanan. But it's also important to understand what the Rabbanan means. When you understand that that's the Rabbanan, it's hard to violate. You know what I'm saying? Like, meaning, if your great-great-grandfather were to come and say to you, the correct thing for you to do is to do this, you'd be like, yeah, totally. So who are the Tanaim and Amoraim to us? Like, those are our great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents that said, this is what you guys need. They're not... The Yetzer Hara to say it's just the Rabbanan is to separate between us and them. They said that there's a group of people, that's a patriarchy of rabbis that made up a thing. Like, come now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a childish way of looking at Torah. It's not, the Rabbanan means the whole of Klal Yisrael. There are all the generations that have all directed us to this thing which still exists, it's Chai B'Kayim today. That's the Rabbanan. So I apologize for the sidetrack. But yes, are we worried that sometimes people will say, oh, if it's the Rabbanan, then I don't need to care about it? Yes, we are worried about that, but that worry requires re-education. So it's important to be able to say to people that there is a din deraisa and a din derabanan. And the Chazal said that if this is an issur derabanan, then we have the right to violate it in areas where we might not have the right to violate the deraisa, but that's because Chazal told us that too. That's okay. So back to the shad. Yeah.
So back to the shad before. If the other case was docha, right? So if it's a docha case, if someone prosecuting that's docha, would they then, let's say they were like hungry, would they be able to, I don't know, buy something from the vending machine or do something else while they're in the case of...
only if it would pertain to the pikuach nefesh. Meaning all pikuach nefesh is d'chuy, completely. Right? Meaning I don't need to worry about anything. Mm-hmm. The shayla comes up, by the way, with regards to the vending machine, is an interesting question that comes up, which, and this is the all things being equal question. Let's say that you have a Jewish nurse that is in a hospital in Yerushalayim, and you have a patient that needs to eat because it's Shabbos, right? So she needs to bring him hot food. So she's going to cook the food on Shabbos, meaning she's going to heat up the food. So why doesn't she just give the patient her lunch? Meaning she has...
What's the...
Meaning, it's pikuach nefesh, he needs to eat.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Right.
So... If Shabbos is d'chuya, so then you can cook whatever you want for this patient, right? But if it's hutra, so then give the patient your lunch. Meaning violate Shabbos as little as possible. But that's the question of all things being equal. Meaning it's not equal. You can't say that every nurse is now obligated to give the patient their lunch. Firstly, because how much lunch is she preparing, is she bringing? And secondly, then, and this is, Rishonim Zalman has a long tshuva about this, but the question of like Hatzalah people coming back home after saving a life. So going to save a life is mutter, right? What about coming home afterwards? Are you allowed to come home afterwards?
Well, if it was docha, would you say that it would make it a non-issue, or it would still be an issue?
Well, it would still be an issue.
Because it's after the fact.
It's afterwards.
People do.
Why do they come home?
They go back to their families.
Oh, because you wouldn't want them to not go
Because long term, what's going to end up happening is if somebody, every time they take a call, is going to be stuck in the hospital until the end of Shabbos, is going to be disincentivized to take the call. Now, that might not be the first week or the second week or the third week, but 15 years after never being home for a Shabbos, the guy's going to be like, oh, I didn't get that call. I didn't hear it, right? Meaning, you are disincentivizing people to violate Shabbos where it is necessary, which is going to end up not all things being equal. Meaning, it's going to end up in greater risk to life because people are going to know that you are not able to come home. There is an exception to that rule. And this comes up from time to time, and I've had this question with doctors in my community, that doctors that always come home after taking call on Shabbos, Hatzalah people that always take, The only exception to that is your own family member. Why? Because you're never not going to take your kid to the hospital. Meaning, if somebody, a kid trips down the stairs and injures themselves on Shabbos, so whether you're on call or not on call, you're taking your kid to the hospital.
You're not allowed to come home after?
Right. You don't come home afterwards because you would never not take that call. You're right there, right? You don't need the incentive of whether or not you can come home or not. You are taking that call.
Is there any way to go home after that?
So if you need to be home in order because you're on call and you need to be able to be available to the community, then yes. But if you're not actually on call that Shabbos and you don't need to be home in order to take another call, so then you'd have to stay. That comes up from time to time. The other exception, meaning the other reason to come home, would be if the hospital, and this happens from time to time, the hospital says we're discharging you because we need beds and there isn't a good place for you to stay in the hospital that you'll be able to recover. And this happens from time to time, especially with young children. The healthiest place for a child to be is not in a hospital. Right? Hospitals are for sick people, not for recovering people. Recovery is very hard in a hospital. So sometimes the halacha is that you should go home, but then it might not be that you could violate that yourself. Maybe then you'd need to call an Uber, get a nachri, go home some other way, meaning not to violate that yourself. Because you would never not take that call, and the only reason to go home would be so that they can recover better, in which case maybe you would call a nachri or have a non-Jew drive your car or whatever the case is.
You could order the Uber.
Right, so in general, and I tell this to all the people that are having babies in my community. Baruch Hashem, my community has a lot of babies that are born. Baruch Hashem, pretty regularly. There's this week there's a baby girl that was born. 2 weeks ago there was a baby boy. I mean, come out every week or two. There's a lot of babies that are being born. I tell Chabura all the time that when your wife is in labor, firstly, that you should make sure that your Uber account is up to date. But the best situation for getting to the hospital is to call an Uber. Why? Because you're not driving, somebody else is driving, and it deals with all of the questions of exchanging of money and getting the change back and all the rest of it. All of that is done, and you can do it with a shinoi in your phone. You do it with the left hand, with a knuckle, whatever the case is. You can do a shinoi. It's shinoi and dinim, which makes it doesn't really take more or less time, right, to do it with a shinoi. Do a shinoi and a dinim, which downgrades the level of the isser. But the other reason that I tell people that they should always take an Uber, this is not a nice thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway, it's kedai to know, is that if it happens that your wife goes into labor, so I tell the Chabura all the time, if your wife goes into labor and is having a baby in a car, you don't want it to be your car. Pay the $50 Uber cleaning fee. That's a much better situation than having to deal with, birth is messy, right? To deal with cleaning up your own car when you have a newborn. Uber will deal with that. You'll take a hit on your rating for the Uber, right? You'll now drop a star, but maybe depending on how they rate you or how nice you are to the Uber driver, pay him a nice tip, and have somebody else deal with cleaning up in the car. I have friends and I have Chabura Mashul that people have had babies in cars. It happens. It happens from time to time. Usually happens with third, fourth, fifth children. Just goes a lot quicker, but it happens. Kacha, these things happen. Always a better idea to have an Uber, both halachically and practically. I recommend getting an Uber even if it's a weekday. It's also a good idea. That's these are all good suggestions. But now it comes back to the question of, can you carry around a walkie-talkie on Shabbos? So the first question that you have to deal with is the question of is this a question of pikuach nefesh, safi pikuach nefesh? Yes. Does it happen from time to time that things happen on a Shabbos that require a walkie-talkie in order to get people treatment as soon as possible? Yes. You have to figure out who at camp exactly needs to have the walkie-talkie, right? That's a shot. That's an important question. Who at camp needs to have the walkie-talkie? So you have to figure out who's going to be around kids. Not everybody that carries a walkie-talkie in general needs to carry a walkie-talkie on Shabbos. You can pretty much figure it out by who usually is making the calls to the infirmary and who is asking the question of, what's for lunch and what time do we need to be at the next whatever. So minimizing who needs to carry the walkie-talkie. That's Aleph. Beis is, okay, so the walkie-talkie is mukta. Mukta is a din d'Rabbanan. Can we violate a din d'Rabbanan in the case of Safek Pikuach Nefesh? Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's question number one. Question number two would be, meaning because we have an Erev, so carrying would be an Issa d'Rabbanan. Meaning carrying outside of an Erev would be it's a carbon, so it would be an Issa d'Rabbanan. We have an Erev, so that takes that away. So you have a Muktzah issue and you have a carrying issue. The carrying issue we taken care of by the Erev. The Muktzah issue, it's a din d'Rabbanan, and a din d'Rabbanan for a Safek Pikuach Nefesh is mutter. What about charging? So this becomes complicated. I was debating this up and down. I spoke to some poskim about this as well. The charging issue is an interesting question because Me'ikar Din, the best thing to do would be to make sure that the walkie-talkie is fully charged before Shabbos. What happens if the walkie-talkie that you have fully charged before Shabbos is now, beeping or a light goes on that it is dying? So is it mutter to charge the walkie-talkie on Shabbos? What do you say? So it depends. Me'ikar Din, you should set up that there's a backup walkie-talkie that is fully charged, right? There's a backup walkie-talkie that is fully charged that you can use. What happens if you're in a situation that isn't a backup walkie-talkie that needs to be charged and the walkie-talkie is dying? So it needs to be charged because otherwise people aren't going to be able to be in touch in the case of Pikuach Nefesh. So when do you charge it? So this is an interesting consideration. Me'ikar Din, the best time to charge it is before it dies. Why before it dies?
It's like you're not restarting anything.
Because there is a makeh b'patish, meaning depending on how you're going to understand the way that electricity works, the walkie-talkie is currently operational. Once it dies, so now you charge it, now it's turning it back on again, which means it wasn't operational, now you're making it operational, which is a question of makeh b'patish, a question of bind and some way, shape, manner, or form, meaning you are activating circuits that weren't activated before. So you should charge it before it dies. Don't wait until it dies to charge it before it dies, meaning it's mutter to charge it if you need to charge it. But make sure that it's charged beforehand. Now, charging should also be done with a shina. Or, even better, with a nachri, right? Get a nachri to do that. That would be a case of Amir L'Akum B'Makam Safek Pikuach Nefesh, which would be mutter, right? Telling a non-Jew to violate Shabbos, a dirabanan of Shabbos, for a question of Safek Pikuach Nefesh, where all things are being equal. So that would be certainly much better. But Me'ikar Din, the best situation is to make sure that you have backup walkie-talkies that are available. So the way that I told some Chabura is that they should make sure that you have, if you have two people in a division or whatever that usually carry a walkie-talkie, so only one of them is going to be on duty with the walkie-talkie for Shabbos. The other one should make sure that his walkie-talkie is fully charged beforehand as well, so that if you need to, you can take that one with you. That would be the best situation. Yeah.
So about like the charging thing, let's say you leave a blow dryer or something like that plugged in, or like even a straightener, and it's like, is that pikuach nefesh to like being able to unplug it on Shabbos?
Oh, okay. So meaning if you have something that is dangerous that's plugged in on Shabbos, right? Meaning it's something that could cause a fire, something with a heating element, whatever the case is. So firstly, let's define exactly what the isur is. So if it is a real heating element, so then that would be kibui, that would be extinguishing, right? Which might be an isur d'oraisa, to extinguish something that has a heating element. That might be an isur d'oraisa. What's that? If it's off?
Yeah, it's off.
Some of them go automatic, but some of them, like I have a curler that could stay hot the whole Shabbos, and it's dangerous because it's on.
Meaning, if it's on and it is plugged in and it is and it's got a heating element, so then the best situation in that case would be to ask a nachri to unplug that. Meaning, ask a non-Jew to unplug that because you're concerned maybe somebody is going to walk past it. It might be an issur d'oraisa to unplug that because if there's a heating element that's on, that's the same as a fire that's lit. So it would be covering a fire, meaning extinguishing a fire on Shabbos, which might be an issur d'oraisa if you are planning on relighting that particular fire, which in the case of an electrical appliance, you want it to work next week. So that would be a question of kibui, of extinguishing, in order to be able to be madlik in the future. So that might be an issue deraisa. There's a sakana involved in that, so I would say to unplug that yourself would be an issue deraisa, maybe, at least an issue derabanan. Asking a nachri to do so would probably be a lot better. What you say?
But if you don't have.
If there isn't a nachri available, so at Camp Baruch Hashem there are nachrim available. This one of the Chabura had the situation on Lil Shabbos that they left the lights on in their room, so we went to find Joe at the front gate. Joe's a nachri. Joe came by, and that's where you hint, hey Joe, the lights are on. And so Joe came by. He's like, Rabbi, you need me to turn the lights up? Yeah, I'm not saying that we should turn the lights off. I'm just saying that they happen to be on, and you happen to be not Jewish. So one of my chaverim is a comedian. Eli Leibowitz, he has this bit where, like, telling a nachri to do something on Shabbos is like ordering a mafia hit. It's like, you want me to do this? I'm not saying that I want you to do this. I'm not saying that I don't want you to do this. I'm just saying if you did it, it would be good for me. It would be good for you, right? It's like ordering a mafia hit. Like, Joe, just the lights happen to be on. You happen to have the capacity to do something about that. So Joe came by and he turned that off, right? So that's the question of kibui. So if there is no nachri available and there is a concern that maybe this is going to start a fire, so then unplugging it with a shina would probably be your best situation.
It just feels so hard because you're like, but I should do it, right?
Yeah, that would be the correct thing to do. If there's no nachri available and there is a concern that this is going to start a fire, so then unplugging it with the shina is probably the correct thing to do. Yeah.
Okay, so a follow-up to that. Usually, let's say, I guess your curler stays hot. Usually, it's like if you leave an iron plugged in, it's off. But so it's not like it's not like extinguishing if you take it out. But you shouldn't leave it in plugged in even though it's off. So
what's the concern?
They still say that it's dangerous if you leave something plugged in.
So something that's plugged in but is not operational, meaning it's not on. If there's no lights on, meaning if it just happens to be plugged in and there's no LEDs, there's no nothing, so then unplugging it with the shinu is probably nothing. Because it's not working currently and there's no current running through it. You're just removing it from the potential of having current run through it.
It's more like muktzah.
Meaning it is muktzah. Meaning, but in terms of kibui, there would be there's no issue if there's some level of danger or concern. So to unplug it with a shinu would probably be mutter in that case. It would probably be recommended. Yeah.
Just to clarify, Shabbos is dechuya in all cases of pikuach nefesh, and it's not in safek pikuach nefesh?
It is. No, it's both safek and pikuach nefesh. Meaning we assume that safek pikuach nefesh and pikuach nefesh are exactly the same. You violate the erases, the rabbanan, everything. As much as you can limit the transgression of Shabbos, we limit the transgression of Shabbos, all things being equal. So an electric car is better than, meaning if you need to rush somebody to the hospital here. So, and you can take, somebody's Tesla or somebody's Honda Odyssey. So which one should you take? Take the Tesla. Right? Take the Tesla. It's an electric car. That's better. That would be hakal kodim. Meaning two cars literally parked next to each other. There's a kid that needs to get to the hospital. Which car should you take? Take the electric car. If it's a 5-second extra walk to get to the electric car, then take the other one. Right? Don't delay at all. Meaning, all things being equal, the two cars are next to each other, take the one that's an electric car. Even if it's safek pikuach nefesh or pikuach nefesh, we assume that they are exactly the same. Good? Excellent. Yeah.
Sorry. How many people could be involved in the saving or coming to the hospital? Can more than one person bring their phone or?
Yeah, as many as are necessary. So what exactly defines necessary? So that's those that are involved in the physical care of the patient and those that are involved in the emotional care of the patient. This is the shaila that Ramosha deals with in Midreshet Mesorah. Can a husband go with his wife to the hospital when she's having a baby? She's in a situation of pikuach nefesh. He is not.
I feel like he's part of the
His child is.
But he's not.
Right.
So how come he can get into the Uber and go with?
Her emotional.
Right, because her emotional needs is for him to be there.
Right.
And that's also pikuach nefesh. Her emotional needs for her husband to be present while she is having a baby, that 100% is part of the question of pikuach nefesh. Yeah.
I feel like in most cases, if you limit the transgressions, then like that usually delays it.
So that's why, all things being equal. Mamish, all things being equal.
I feel like in most cases.
In most cases, if you're not sure, then forget that deliberation entirely and do everything that is necessary immediately. Meaning, if you start thinking too much, problem. Like, I had this situation a number of years ago in my shul. It was a Shabbos morning, there was an elderly person that was in shul that collapsed in shul. Now, Baruch Hashem, we have lots of doctors in shul, but so within 30 seconds there were like 25 doctors surrounding the person. And I looked at one of the doctors that was there and I said, "Are we calling 911? And they said, "Yes." So I have my phone under my shtanda, I took out my phone, I called 911. Middle of shul, was basically at the end of shul, came out, but lots of people there, pulled out my phone, in order to be pikuach nefesh. Not a question, meaning, could we do a thing there that would state, don't care? Meaning, and the question is this pikuach nefesh? So, Rishachta told me, I asked him this question a number of years ago with regards to people eating on Yom Kippur. So he said it's less of a question for Rabbanim and much more of a question for a doctor. If the doctor says that the person should eat on Yom Kippur, then they should eat on Yom Kippur. Just no questions. Listen to what the doctor says. Right? You pass on according to the doctor. If there's no doctor, so now you have to. But then you machmir as much as possible. Machmir. That's the Mesorah that Soloveitchik from Chaim Briska, that we're machmir in pikuach nefesh. We're not making Yom Kippur and we're not making Shabbos. We're machmir in pikuach nefesh.
Who says that?
Chaim Soloveitchik. That's the Mesorah that Rishachta told us from the Rav, from Moshe, from Reb Chaim. That we're machmir in pikuach nefesh as much as possible. You have to take care of people's lives. So I didn't ask any questions. The doctor said to me, "Yes, call 911." So I'm calling 911. And the job of the rabbi is to call 911 because the Mechalo Shabbos. Now, calling 911 is probably only an issue of the rabbi, maybe, right? Meaning electricity on the phone, but absolutely. Right? The ambulance shows up, they're all doing Mechalo Shabbos, getting them onto the ambulance, thousands of malachos, whatever the case, it doesn't make a difference. If there is a question, there's no question. If there is a deliberation, can I violate the Rabbanon and Deraisa? So then you violate the Rabbanon, all things being equal. Right? Meaning, if there are two people standing there in shul, one of them is a Jew and one of them is a non-Jew, and you have the decision who should drive to the hospital. So have the non-Jew drive to the hospital. That's better. That's all things being equal. Right? There's two people standing there. You have a Honda and you have a Tesla. All things being equal, take the Tesla. But if it's not all things being equal, then, or if there's any second of deliberation, then you violate Shabbos completely. That's in all questions of pikuach nefesh, Safi pikuach nefesh. You violate Shabbos 100%. That's the din. So that's effectively what I said to the Chabura. Do you carry walkie-talkies on Shabbos? Yes, only the people that are necessary. Make sure that they're all charged beforehand, and if they are about to die, then make sure that you charge them before they die. And even better, make sure that you have a backup beforehand. Meaning, chacham in a barasha. You figure those things out to make sure that all of that is already taken care of ahead of time. I mean, prepare for this as much as you possibly can. So I suppose that was question number one. I don't know what's our schedule? I think that...
Lunch is at 1:35.
I think that was the end of the period. I'm happy to keep going if you guys want to keep going. I don't want to step it out, but
That was so good.
Yeah, that was amazing.
okay. So to be continued. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Please.
Okay.
Thank you so
If you have
much.
any follow-up questions or anything comes up at camp, how long
So
you guys stay around
exciting.
for?
Thank you so much. Wait, can you please
Thank you.
do this? Like, this is amazing.
Yes.